What's up, y'all? Welcome to At the End of the Day podcast. I'm your host, Cherie, and I hope you're having an amazing day so far. Now, before we get into today's topic, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you can be notified of all the new episodes. And as I always say, feel free to leave a comment because I actually read them, okay? I enjoy hearing from y'all. For weekly encouragement, make sure you go like my Facebook page and follow me on Instagram and TikTok. If you need someone to talk to or you have a topic that you would love to hear me talk about, make sure you send me an email to ateotdpodcast8@gmail.com. And as I also always say, if you know someone that needs encouragement, make sure you share this episode with them because you just never know what they're going through. So y'all know I love to give y'all context as to how the topics for these episodes even come about, right? So the inspiration for today's episode comes from a sermon I heard from Pastor Keon Henderson entitled Waiting on a Win. In that sermon, he talked about going to a chiropractor, and he even shared the conversation he had with her and talking to her about how she does what she does. And one of the things that she had shared with him is that a lot of people do not realize that their pain is actually not from the source. So she continued to say that everything is connected. So what she was saying is that one misalignment in one area of the body is going to cause a misalignment in another area of the body. So Pastor Keon ended up continuing his sermon by talking about how everything in our lives, especially when it comes to our relationship with God, is connected. So I figured, it'd be a good topic to talk about. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into that today. So on today's episode, I'm going to talk about how everything in our life is connected. So let's intentionally grow our garden. So I want to start off by saying that I learned that everything is connected when I went to therapy. I honestly went into therapy thinking that we just are the way we are, right? Like nothing happens for us to be the way that we are. In other words, we woke up like this, right? Like that's literally what my mindset was going into therapy. But as I went and I started to learn more about myself, I learned that something good or bad happened for me to become the way I am. Now, I'm pretty sure I have said this in my episodes before, but I truly believe that everybody should go to therapy at least once in their life. If you're one of those people that's like, I never want to be that person that has to go to therapy for the rest of my life, at least go one time. Okay? You would be surprised what you learn about yourself. I personally learned a lot about myself while going. And today I'm going to share one of the biggest things that I had learned. And I'm sharing it because, again, God has instructed for me to share it. It's honestly something that I didn't want to share. And when God told me when I was doing my notes, like, Cherie, need to share it, I was like, God, again? Like, you want me to share something else that I don't want to share again? And he was like, yeah. So as we all know from our obedience episode, I don't do the disobedience. Okay. So that is why we're here. I started going to therapy because there was a period in my life where my anxiety was on 1,000. Okay. And then on top of it, like anxiety by itself is a lot, right? If you got it, anxiety alone by itself is a lot to deal with. But then on top of that, it seemed like every September to October time period, your girl was moody. And I don't mean annoyed. I mean moody. To the point where if you would have asked me something as simple as, Cherie, what day is it? Or Cherie, what time it is? I would have looked at you like I was about to bite your head off. Right? I mean, I was mean, rude, and nasty to everyone around me. And I even had a boyfriend at the time that I was starting arguments with just because over everything and anything. Like, why would you go ahead and leave that ketchup like that? Oh, what, you don't hold doors no more? Look, I'm telling y'all, it was the petty of the petty to the point where I started to get on my own nerves. Now, you know it's bad when you get on your own nerves. So that's when I was like, I got to do something about this. I had to go to therapy. And that's where therapy started for me. So when I started speaking to the therapist, I had shared with her that one of the main reasons why I started therapy was because I noticed that between September and October of every year, I am extremely agitated, annoyed, moody, rude, nasty, the whole shebang. So she's like, well, did anything traumatic happen to you during that time? So I instantly was like, no. So then she asked me, did anything life changing happen to me during that time? So I nonchalantly tell her that, yeah, like, I had a miscarriage, but surely that can't be the reason, why I'm out here moody. That was years ago. So then she asked me to describe the experience of what happened during that time. And I told her, I found out that I was pregnant and that I wasn't pregnant all in the same sentence. Now, the more I spoke to her, the more I started to realize that experiencing a miscarriage truly did alter my life. And because I didn't give myself the proper time to grieve or heal or work through it, I didn't realize that it had altered my life. So then she informed me that even though it happened years ago, because I didn't grieve properly, my body was naturally grieving every year. Yeah. That's how important it is to make sure you grieve and heal properly. My body every year was naturally going through the same pain all over again. And here I am thinking I'm just living my life, moving on. Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it stunk. But we got to move on. Like that's how I handle everything. It's not healthy, but that's how I've always been accustomed to handling things is my body's first reaction, mainly my brain, I guess you could say, is to be like, we don't have time for that. Like, yeah, all this stuff, all hell is breaking loose. I'm sad. I'm devastated. I just want to cry. I just want to sit in the corner and be in a ball all day. I want to lay in the bed and drink soda and eat pizza and just pig out. But I can't. Life is going on. So I got to move with it. And by being like that, I never allow myself to grieve properly. I never allow myself the time to actually heal in a way that doesn't allow it to come back. Because of course you're always going to have moments where, you think about it and you're sad, but that doesn't mean you're not healed, if that makes sense. So by me not healing properly from experiencing a miscarriage, I ended up developing anxiety. My anxiety stemmed from the fact that there was a possibility that anything life altering could happen at any moment and I wouldn't know or have any control of it. So that is what was fueling my anxiety. So here I am dealing with a miscarriage, thinking that that's just a pain in itself. But then that pain went ahead and developed anxiety. And now I have anxiety, never had it before in my life, and I'm wondering where it came from. So years had gone by, but my anger and anxiety was connected to my unresolved grief. So why am I sharing all of this? One, I'm sharing this so that you can identify your own pain and heal. And then two, I'm sharing this because I need you to understand that the way you are is connected to something. How you are isn't random. The way we are in life is connected to something. And the same goes for our relationship with God. We lack certain things in our relationship with God because it's connected to something. Something may have happened to cause you to lack faith or to lack patience, or it caused you not to be as close to God as you should be. Where you are right now in your spiritual walk with God isn't a coincidence. It's all connected. So I want to talk about 4 connections that we may not be aware of when it comes to our spiritual walk with God. The first connection is that hope is connected to faith. Long story short, if you don't have hope, you don't have faith. The lack of hope produces a lack of faith. And how do I know that? Because I keep telling y'all, Hebrews 11:1 defines faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. So in other words, faith requires for us to have confidence in hope. Without confidence in hope, how do we have faith? We don't. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines hope as to cherish a desire with anticipation, to want something to happen or be true. So if we give up on anticipating that God can or will do something, we lack hope. If we give up on simply wanting God to do something, we lack hope. So I have a question for you, right? The question is, do you lack hope? And before you answer, I need you to think, right? Don't be that person that's all quick to answer like, of course I don't lack hope, Cherie. Just sit with it. Just sit with it. Do you lack hope? So I have a follow-up question I want you to think about. If a lack of hope produces a lack of faith, what does your prayer life look or sound like? So I would assume that if you lack hope, right, your prayers sound like you lack hope, which also means it sounds like you lack faith too. Now, I will also assume that your prayer life doesn't look the way it should due to you lacking hope. And what I mean by that is you aren't praying to God about everything the way you should. You only pray to Him about the things you have hope in Him about. Or you only pray to Him about the things you have faith in Him about. You need to pray with power and authority, and you need to pray daily. And if you're anything like me, you need to pray multiple times a day. Yeah, heavy on the multiple times a day. I feel like society and majority of the Christian community have a way of deeming people that are honest about their lack of faith in God as like the black sheep. Meanwhile, you already feel bad about the fact that your faith is not where you feel like it should be or where you know it should be. And you don't want it to be like that. Your faith getting stronger is connected to your ability to be honest and identify where your hope has gone. You didn't just wake up one day and lack hope. No. Something happened that resulted in you lacking hope. And you may not think it's a big deal, but it is because it's a domino effect. Your faith is the key to the doors that God has for you. But you have to increase your faith before He can open the doors. So stop hiding behind your lack of hope. Instead, you need to do something about it because if you don't, you'll continue to block your blessings. A second connection that we may not be aware of when it comes to our spiritual walk with God is that a lack of a relationship with God is connected to fear. When you don't know God, you view everything as happening to you instead of for you. And when I say know God, I don't mean believing that He exists. I'm talking about knowing His word. I'm talking about knowing what He says about you being His child, what He says about life and suffering, what He says about love, what He says about the world and how to treat people. That is a relationship. Knowing God allows you to build trust, and that demolishes fear. So when you know that God is always in control, that means that you don't have fear when it looks like everything is out of control. And when you know that God has a plan for your life, you don't have fear in not knowing what the plan is. I recently watched a sermon by Pastor Cheryl Brady entitled A Certain God in an Uncertain Season. And there was a moment in the sermon where she talked about how we need to spend time with God and reading His Word, and how we go ahead and we spend 8 hours at a job and yet we act like we don't have time for God and that we need to make the time. And that really put my relationship with God in perspective because it's true. We go ahead every Monday through Friday and we designate 8 hours to a job continuously, consistently. Never fails. We know Monday through Friday, unless you use a PTO or some type of vacation or something, you know where you're going to be at. And yet we don't try to implement those same type of schedules when it comes down to reading our word. And that's not okay. We have to make the time. So in the same week that I watched the sermon by Pastor Cheryl Brady, I also came across a video on TikTok. We love TikTok. And it was a video about the importance of making God first. They did a physical demonstration. And in the demonstration, they had a glass vase. And that was supposed to represent holding everything together. Pretty much demonstrating how everything is connected. Then they also had small rocks. That represented everything that we deem important. And then they had one big rock that had God on it. And obviously that represented God. So in the demonstration, the person at first had went ahead, poured all the small rocks in first, right? Which represented, like I said, everything we deem important. And then the last thing they put in was God. Now, everything did not fit, especially not God. That God rock was not fitting in that vase. It was overflowing. But then he went ahead, took everything out, and this time he put God first. And then he poured everything else in. And everything fit perfectly. And I feel like that demonstration did a great job of showing us the importance of putting God first. That if we go ahead and put him first, everything else will follow. Everything connected that we have deemed important will be blessed. Only because we put God first. And that when you know God and you put him in the center, nothing bad like fear can come in. Because honestly, there's no room for it to come in when you put God first. The third connection that we may not be aware of when it comes to our spiritual walk with God is that weakness is connected to strength. Now, everybody who knows me knows that I listen to at least one sermon a day, okay? And as I have listened to sermons and studied my word, I've come to fully embrace the fact that when I feel weak, God is actually making me stronger. Because truth is, if we never experience a period of weakness, how will we get stronger? And when I think of weakness being a requirement in order to become stronger, I think about the gym, right? When you first go into the gym and you start lifting weights, you feel weak, right? All you feel is the pressure of all those that weight on you. And you like, ain't no way I'm gonna make it through this set. Ain't no way. And you almost think about taking some weights off, right? You don't just go into the gym and be like, yeah, I'm put 100 on each side. No, you're not. No, you're not. You crazy if you do it. But no, you're not. You're not doing it. You're going to gradually work your way through. And when you start, you do feel weak. But the more you continuously work at getting stronger by working that same weight, by constantly showing up every day, you eventually get to a place where that weight isn't that difficult anymore. You're doing it easy, no problems. Then, do you stay there? No, you don't stay at that weight. You add more weights. And then you go back to being at that stage of feeling weak again, feeling nothing but pressure. But you stick with it and you continue and you don't quit. And the same goes for us when we experience a season of weakness. We feel the pressure of the trial and tribulations. And it feels like too much for us, to be honest. And truth is, it is too much for us. Hence why God carries us through those seasons. And even though God is carrying you through those seasons, he's also strengthening you. And how do I know that? Okay, we're going to read 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 8 through 10. And it reads, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. When we're going through a season of weakness, we're asking God to take that weakness away, to take these trials and tribulations away, to simply rescue us. Okay? We like, hey, where is the white flag? I don't want this. Okay? I know you out here and saying that you don't give us more than we can bear. And at this moment, I'm not sure that you actually doing it. Because it feels like way more than I can bear. But you have to understand that his plan is bigger than your plan. His plan is for you to become stronger in the very thing you want him to stop. Think about that. His plan is for you to become stronger in the very thing it is that you're asking him to stop. So when you feel weak, don't give up. Instead, keep pushing. Be like James when he said in James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. He said to consider it pure joy. He didn't say to consider it discouragement. He didn't say to consider it disrespect. He did not say to consider it frustrated. He said to consider it pure joy. And honestly, we should. Because once you get through that season, you will be stronger than when you went in. And once you get through that season, you'll be more prepared for the next one. The last connection that we may not be aware of when it comes to our spiritual walk with God is that obedience is connected to surrender. Now, y'all have heard me talk about obedience, but did you know that obedience is connected to your ability to surrender? Everybody thinks that they can be obedient, but not everybody is willing to surrender. Now, surrender what, you may ask? Surrender your need to be in control, your need to know everything that's going on all the time, and your hesitance to completely commit to the process. You cannot obey God without surrendering. Obeying God is doing what He commanded you to do. And sometimes what He commands you to do isn't going to make sense to you, but your ability to do it anyway comes from your ability to surrender. So I'm going to share an example with you based on a time that I had to surrender. So there was a time where I went to Aldi's. There was a woman there with her son that had a disability. And her son was screaming consistently, extremely loud throughout the entire store, the entire time his mom was, shopping. Now, I could see the mom trying to hurry up and just get everything she needed. But even with everything going on, she remained calm and tried to tend to her son. And you could tell how much she loved her son just by how she was trying to tend to him. But you could also tell that she felt embarrassed based on how she was, looking. So I went to the cash register. She ended up being in the line next to me. I checked out before she did, grabbed my bags, put them in the car, and was getting ready to pull off to go to the next store. Before I started my car, I said, Lord, bless that mother. She's truly doing the best she can, and she's a good mom. And I could tell how much she loved her son just by how she tended to him. So God goes ahead and says, go tell her. Who? You can't be talking about me because I feel like I told you so you could tell her. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't start that prayer for you to be telling me to go tell her myself. You're God. You know all things. I just told you. You go tell her what I said. That's how I feel. Now, I told y'all that I don't talk to God like I'm in King James. I talk to him just like I'm talking to y'all right now. So, of course, I went to him, and, after he goes ahead and says that to me, I'm a little taken aback. So I'm like, hey, God, I have a whole nother store to get to. And now I'm trying to find more reasons as to why I can't do what he asked me to do. And I was like, ooh, and by the way, she ain't even come out yet, and I got a whole nother store to get to. Don't you know that as soon as I said that to God, the woman come out the store, head into her car with her son in the cart. In that moment, I felt like God was loudly saying, checkmate, Cherie. Checkmate. Go do what I told you to do. Stop playing with me. I was playing. I was playing. Now, honestly, I was still hesitant to do what God told me to do because I didn't know that lady. I didn't know how she was going to respond. I honestly didn't know what to say. And I was nervous because I had never gone up to a stranger before to encourage them, especially not due to God telling me to do it. That was like a whole nother place for me to be in. Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, the whole shebang. So at this point, I'm watching the lady from afar, right? And I'm watching her put her son in the car, and then she started putting her groceries in. So do you think I started going over there? Of course I didn't. I was still hesitant. I was not in a place where I was ready to surrender. I'm going to be honest about that. I wasn't ready to surrender my need to know why God was asking me to do this in the first place. I also wasn't ready to surrender feeling comfortable to obey God. But here's the thing with my relationship with God, right? So, like, I have noticed that when I do not do what God tells me to do, or I delay in doing it, He tends to allow my throat to get tight, which then causes a sense of urgency, right? I know it sounds horrible. It probably sounds a little scary. I promise you it's not. I just know it's Him when it happens. So, of course, I'm sitting in the car, still watching the lady from afar. And what you think started happening? Yep, my throat started getting a little tight. So I finally was like, all right, fine. Fine, fine. You have won. I will surrender and do what you told me to do. You got it. Okay? So I walked over to the lady as she's putting groceries in her car, and I said, hello. I could tell she was very hesitant and a little bit afraid to say hello back. And I immediately said to her, I said, I just wanted to take our time to let you know that I think you're such a great mom and that you're doing an amazing job with your son. So she instantly started crying, and she started expressing to me how she felt horrible that everybody in the store had to hear her son, and how he normally isn't triggered by grocery shopping, but today he had woke up having such a horrible day, and that she had nobody to go ahead and watch him, but she had to get grocery shopping done. And I just went ahead, gave her a hug, and I encouraged her. I said, you're doing such a great job. Keep it up. Everybody has a bad day, but that's all it is, a bad day. And I was like, keep doing what you're doing. And she thanked me, and I walked away and I went to my car. So why am I sharing all of this? I'm sharing this because I want you to understand that I couldn't obey God until I was willing to surrender my need to know why God was having me do it, and until I was willing to surrender my need to be comfortable. I'm also sharing this because by me surrendering, I was able to obey God, which then resulted in someone else being blessed and encouraged during a time that they didn't feel their best. So the next time God tells you to do something, the first thing you need to do is surrender. Don't question Him, and don't try to make sense out of what it is that He's asking you to do. As Nike says, just do it. So in this episode, I talked about how one thing is connected to another. But truth is, majority of what I spoke about is connected to each other. Hope is connected to faith. Faith is connected to surrender. Surrender is connected to obedience. Obedience is connected to your relationship with God. And your relationship with God is connected to strength. When you lack one thing, you're lacking in other areas as well. That's why you can't ignore the area that you're lacking. Instead, you have to do something about it. So guess what, y'all? That's right. It's Q&S time. Q&S stands for quote in scripture. This is time I set aside in the episode to share a quote in scripture with you to encourage you throughout the week ahead. The quote I chose for this week is by an anonymous person, and they said, there is no such thing as a coincidence. Notice how everything in your life somehow leads up to the next. It's all connected. So have you ever sat and thought about how everything in your life is connected? Like, really think about it. Had you not gone to a certain place at a certain time, you wouldn't have met a certain person, right? Or if you didn't leave one job to go to another job, you would have never been able to go up the corporate ladder the way you did. Or if you didn't leave that relationship, you would have never met the person you now call your spouse. Now, you went ahead and deemed them as coincidences, but they aren't. They are simply connected. Why? Because God has a purpose in everything that He does. Now, whenever I think about everything being connected and God having a bigger plan than we can fathom, I always think about my grandparents' love story, which is honestly one of my favorite of all time. But I'm a little biased. But their story of how they met truly does show how strategic God is, right? And it's honestly not even just about them physically meeting. It's about what happened before they got to the meeting. Let me explain. So my grandmother's family lived in Georgia. Something happened and they had to move to PA immediately. My grandmother during that time was living in Florida. My great-grandmother later on decided to take her and my grandmother to go live in PA with the rest of the family. My grandfather's family, on the other hand, lived in West Virginia. They decided to move to Pennsylvania. Now, both families didn't just decide to move to PA as a whole. Nope. They decided to move to the same city outside of Philadelphia. Now, that resulted in my grandparents going to the same school, later on getting married, and then later on having children. One of those children ended up being my beautiful mother, who later on had me. And here I am doing a podcast that you're listening to. And that is what I mean when I say everything is connected, because God has a bigger plan than you. Now, you're a part of the plan, but you're not the overall plan. God took the experience from both families and produced something good from it. And I like to think that this podcast is a part of the good that was produced from them simply making the decision to move. Now, I didn't know all of my great-grandparents, but their story is connected to my story. I say all of that to say that you need to embrace all of you. The moments where you were happy, the moments when you were sad, the moments when you were in pain. You must embrace your past, present, and future because they are connected. All of that helped you become who you are today. The scripture I chose for this week is from Romans chapter 8, verse 28, and I'm reading from the New King James Version, and it reads, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose." This scripture perfectly describes that everything is connected. God doesn't just do something with the good and throw away the bad, or just do something with the bad and throw away the good. No. Instead, he comes in and combines the good and the bad to produce something good. So stop deeming your bad experiences as a waste. And stop deeming your difficult seasons as nothing worth talking about. Because when God is in it, your bad experiences is connected to something good. Because God wastes nothing. And that's why we have to look for the lesson in everything. So I want you to find comfort in the fact that you may not know what God is up to, but at least you know he's up to something good. Now, before you go, I want to leave you with this. Everything being connected is exactly why we say everything happens for a reason. The reason one thing happens is to produce the result of another thing happening. Because if one thing didn't happen, you wouldn't have gotten to the next thing. That's why I try to relax when I'm running late, right? I don't know why God is having me run late, but he's doing it for a reason. It could be him saving me from an accident, or it could be him just having me leave a little bit later so that all the lights are green. You know? I don't know why he does it, but he does it. We have to identify the areas in our life we are weak in so we can strengthen them. Because if we don't, one weakness produces another weakness. Especially when it comes to our relationship with God. Because at the end of the day, it's all connected.
I know you're telling me the truth. I'd rather have all your weight removed. You wonder why I don't let you in. Because I got better things to do. Better things. Better things. Moving on to bigger and better things. Been through the worst, I need better things. If you knew better.